Hello, welcome to the STARS webinar, Achieving STARS Gold, Best Practices from CU Boulder STARS Report. My name is Jillian Buckholz. I'm the AASHE STARS Program Coordinator, and I will be facilitating this webinar with you today. If you've successfully logged into the webinar, you should see a screen that illustrates a gray box with the webinar title in it and a photo of a campus behind it. You have the choice of either listening by telephone or computer to this webinar. You can choose whichever works for you. But if you do listen by telephone, please call the number provided on the right-hand toolbar and enter the access code when prompted to be able to hear the audio. If you're using a computer, you just need speakers or headphones. If you're having difficulties, don't worry, we will be posting a video of this broadcast on our website soon after the webinar concludes. If you have any questions at any time, you can type them into the questions pane in the right-hand toolbar. We'll be addressing questions at the end of the webinar, and due to the influx of questions, we might not be able to address all of the questions asked during the Q&A portion. However, you can email any questions that you might have that aren't answered to stars@aashe.org. We will not be using the Raise Your Hand feature since we are allowing attendees to submit questions during the webinar through the questions pane. With that, I'm going to get us started. First, I want to welcome again all of our attendees for participating in this webinar today, and also welcome our speakers. We have 3 individuals from CU Boulder that will be joining us today to talk about Boulder STARS Report and how they were able to achieve STARS Gold. The first person with us is Dave Newport. Dave is the Director of the Environmental Center at UC Boulder. He's also a faculty associate in the Environmental Studies Department teaching campus carbon neutrality planning, and he chairs the Neutrality Working Group at UC Boulder. Dave is also an AASHE board member, and he is also a member of the STARS Steering Committee. Joining Dave will be Natasha Goss. She is an undergrad student at UC Boulder majoring in chemistry with an environmental emphasis. Since fall of 2009, Natasha has served as a sustainability projects intern with the University Environmental Center. And also joining us is Linda Guidice. She is currently a master's candidate in environmental studies at UC Boulder working on sustainability policy. She's a sustainability policy assistant with the UC Boulder Environmental Center, and she's also a graduate intern at the National Renewable Laboratory. So thanks to the 3 of you for joining us today. Just to let everybody know how this webinar will flow, I've just introduced all of our presenters, and our 3 presenters will be giving an overview of CU Boulder STARS Report, and then we'll dive into the Q&A. And just as a reminder, you can type your questions into the questions pane at any time during the webinar, and we will address them at the end. So with that, I'm just going to hand over controls to Dave, and he's going to get us started.
And good afternoon. Welcome everyone to the webinar from sunny and warm Boulder. We don't get to say that a lot in December, so we're happy to be able to say it today. And I'm hoping that everything now and everybody see the opening slide. Jillian, is that working for you?
Yep, works great, Dave. Thanks.
All right. So we've got a few slides, and then we will hopefully get into a lot of questions and answers. And so we're going to try and get through the slides pretty quick and then get some dialogue. And so I wanted to encourage everyone who has a burning question to pen it now and send it in through your box. And so we get those teed up, and we'll take those when we get done with the slides. So again, welcome to Boulder. Just for those of you playing the home game, Jillian is in Albany where it's like minus 1,000 degrees today and she's freezing, and we're at 48 degrees and feeling pretty smug about it. And Boulder's not normally this way, so we're just enjoying our day in the sun. The University of Colorado at Boulder is a large public research university. We are about 30,000 or so in enrollment. We're a comprehensive university and have a lot of history on sustainability research, academics, operations, and student leadership. And all of those things led us to want to sign up to be STARS charter participants in September of 2009. So many of you who are also doing STARS perhaps signed up at that point and got started early. So we had a long time to think about it, I guess is what the moral of the story is. We signed up in September. We didn't really launch until, as you can see, May of this year, the formal process. There was a lot of planning and so forth that went into that in advance, but it was important for us to get our house in order and to get leadership support, and frankly the memo from the Vice Chancellor and the Provost sent out to all of the personnel on campus saying, hey, we're going down this road, and please cooperate, participate, and so forth. That high-level affirmation was important to opening doors and making this a university-wide effort that everybody could buy into. And so we kicked it off in May and June, went through the process in the summer, and the process looks like this in our mind, and this is sort of our take on it. We planned from the beginning, after we did some back-of-the-envelope projections, that we thought we could hit gold. We thought it would be very close and very difficult, and frankly, not a gimme. We were more than interested in pursuing every possible avenue because we thought it would be difficult to get over the threshold of 65 percentage points, and it turns out it was. But that planning process was crucial to that, as a lot of our sort of ducks got put in a row in order to pursue that goal, and we wanted to let everybody know from the beginning that that was our goal, and it was going to be something that was going to challenge us. And so people rose up for that. We established timelines and so forth. I'm not going to read all these bullets. The knowledge-based mode is sort of after we launched and brought together the 40-some-odd responsible parties and allied staff and support to, frankly, a large workshop where we fed everybody lunch, and went through the whole STARS thing because they didn't know it, and so we kind of had a STARS 101, answered questions and so forth. And knowledge-based mode continued throughout the phasing because people always have interpretive questions and so forth going forward, knowledge-based questions. So having a capable core staff to handle all that was critical. And our core staff was represented here today, Linda and Natasha, who you'll hear from in a moment. We also had very core and very able staffing from facilities management, the person of Mo Tabrizi, our campus conservation resource officer, and Kristen Epley, our sustainability projects manager. Those five, between the three of us here, and those two are really the core team going forward. And so we all helped everyone else on knowledge base. Then data gathering over the summer, and of course that is a lot of reaching out to people, a lot of taking phone calls, answering emails, gentle prods, planning and going back and forth with some of the more difficult areas of STARS, which we'll get into with curriculum in a moment. And then closing, which I think the closing phase is the last few weeks or month prior to setting a deadline for submission. Once we saw that we could, we thought, achieve our goal, then we really turned up the heat in the last few weeks. And there was, I tell people, it's much like planning a conference. There's a million facts and details that have to be monitored, and so we did. But it's also an opportunity because, again, we're within sight of our destination. By then, we know what we're going to get. We know what's in play, and we could get if we pressed for it. And frankly, we got a few credits in the last month because we said to people, hey, I really need the idling policy, for instance, to get implemented that we've been talking about. Can we fast track that or whatever, and squeeze that? I think it was a quarter point. Anyway, so closing is a very difficult phase, but also includes a lot of verification and pressure testing. We'll talk more about that in a moment as well. I'm going to talk real quick about our operations credits and sort of how we went on that, and then turn this over to Linda, who's going to talk about the other categories. So we did in the beginning think about having a centralized data collection, that is asking all of our responsible parties to basically send the team their data and we'd massage it and put it into the reporting tool and so forth, that didn't work. So we decentralized, gave everyone a password into the reporting tool, and then allowed them to, self-report. And that sounds like a simple decision, and it was, because the first idea didn't work. But it was an important decision, and but then of course we had some technical issues about people getting into the reporting tool and really understanding what to do and so forth. But that was where the team came through. We had workshop again to go through it all and keep working with people over the summer. And the operations category, as you guys who even scanned this know, includes probably the most diverse array of credits. Frankly, we thought we would do better in operations than we did, but what we came to find out is that as a large public research university with over 200 and some odd buildings, 80% of which are over 50 years old, while we have a robust LEED buildings program here and 10 LEED gold buildings and building LEED all the time, we still have 200 something that are old and don't perform particularly well, and it's going to be a while before they get upgraded. Anyway, long story short, size is a bit of a impediment in the operational categories, and we just sort of learned to accept that. But I got to tell you that there were some unhappy meetings when we were going through the operations credits and people were thinking we should do better than we were able to do in that category, and we just had to sort of get used to that and understand why. But the good news is it gives us stretch goals going forward and incentives to do better. But operations, while we think we're pretty good at operations, they were a real challenge for us. So that's a little bit about operations, and I'm going to ask Linda now to talk a little bit about planning, administration, and engagement.
So on the PAE credits, Natasha and I early on met with the Vice Chancellor's Office of Administration, and our first objective was to really understand what are the PAE credits. So we went through credit by credit, and we tried to understand the range of credits from the very strategic down to the operating type credits in this area. We worked with Kristen Epley. We tried to understand the interpretations. We started with the strategic master and carbon neutrality plans, where CU already has quite a bit of sustainability embedded within those plans and takes already quite a bit of leadership. In addition to that, we looked at the diversity and outreach programs, where I think CU does actually quite well. And we were able to make a contribution with our volunteer programs, and we helped the volunteer coordinators set up a survey to collect all of the volunteer type of activities that were happening in multiple places across the university. What was interesting about the results on the volunteer survey is previously CU had participated in a national survey on student engagement, and using that as a benchmark, we found that our results for the volunteer survey were consistent with those results. In particular, Dave and I and Natasha have talked about STARS in this area gives us a very interesting capacity building social capital, if you will, opportunity. We were able to meet with people in the PA area who otherwise are not directly involved in sustainability. So we thought that this pillar of the STARS program actually allowed us to engage people who otherwise are not directly involved in sustainability. So as Dave mentioned earlier, one of our challenges, of course, was how do we get started on the education and research credit. So once we had some work started already on the operations and PAE credits, we sat in our working group meetings that we had on a regular basis, and we started to brainstorm on how we would approach the ENR credits and specifically defining sustainability in the curriculum. And I'm a graduate student in the environmental studies program, so I volunteered to initiate a working group with my fellow graduate students to take a look at a first stab at developing the preliminary draft of what such a definition would look like. That working group comprised of 3 PhD students in the environmental studies program and Natasha and I. In developing that draft, we first, of course, looked at what the STAR sample criteria was to understand the scope of such a definition. But we, of course, adapted that definition in the context of what is and who is CU. As a large research-oriented institution with an interdisciplinary approach to education. We have many research institutions here, as well as schools and departments. We have a unique location and culture.
We'll look at that definition.
No, we're going to next. But we also were very much so aware that we didn't want to come up with a generic definition. We wanted it to be meaningful. And so we used this well-established acronym to make sure that our definition was actually specific and applicable. And when we came to actually evaluating our course offerings, that we could actually have a real definition to measure those courses, that course content by. Once our draft definition was ready, we presented it to our faculty representative responsible for E&R credits. And with some slight revisions, the draft was adopted in June 2010 by a 3-person interdepartmental committee. And if you allow us, we'll show you right now what that document looks like and what happened after we adopted the actual definition. So here you will see a process, an internal, if you will, policy or process document that we presented to Provost Moore here at the university that not only describes the steps we went through to arrive at such a definition, but also the definition itself. And this was in preparation of our upcoming communication to all faculty across the university campus who would eventually be evaluating their course offerings against this definition. And now I'll turn over to Natasha, who will describe to you how we took this process forward in evaluating CU's course offerings against this definition.
All right. Initially, we developed based on the definition that Linda just described, that in addition to capturing sustainability in the coursework, tried to capture multiple other credits as well, such as sustainability learning outcomes and research. Now, out of 2,500 faculty members approximately, we did not have the high response rate that was required for statistical validity. This was not a random sample. As you can imagine, there was a slight bias towards those who are already very involved in sustainability at CU. As a result, a small committee reviewed the courses in the CU 2010 course catalog based on this definition and determined which ones had sustainability content. We also had a cautious approach in which if something was not clearly based on this definition in the catalog related or focused, it was not included, even if it was potential to make a case. As such, there may have been a slight undercount in our definition and in our reporting. In fact, a couple additional courses have come to light since then. The definition we used was an NSF definition of geoscience research, which is fairly narrow. However, it does include a clause relating to human survival and welfare. This was considered broadly interpreted and adopted by CU researchers Alan Townsend, who is the ENVS chair, James White, the director of INSTAR, Institute for Arctic and Alpine Research, and Connie Stephen, the series director, and that became the definitional framework by which we assayed sustainability research that was conducted at CU. When looking at individual faculty members, we considered interdisciplinary work in their research, affiliation with multiple departments, and affiliation with departments such as Environmental Studies and the Institute for Arctic and Alpine Research, which generally host researchers who conduct sustainability research. As we are about to show you here, This is the survey that we developed and sent out to all faculty members online. It shows sustainability focused and related courses, and on the next page it inquires about, let's see here, sustainability focused immersive experiences, which was one of the other credits that we just had to find one immersive experience that certainly qualified, but it was much easier to capture it through this methodology than we in fact did. Despite the low response rate and the fact that we had to adopt another method to finish the survey process, this survey was helpful in that it drew upon these auxiliary credits and allowed us to capture some additional courses. Now back to the review process before submission. We conducted an ongoing review of the data we had collected and the progress we were making on certain credits on roughly a weekly basis. In addition, we conducted a comprehensive final review. Dave was chiefly in charge of that.
So thank you, Linda and Natasha. The final pressure tests came as a result of some input we received from Jillian, our Campus Conservation Resource Officer, part of the test, part of the team, who suggested, because we had such a diverse data gathering process throughout the summer, and while data was coming in, we were monitoring it and reviewing it and so forth and trying to answer any questions and get it essentially tight and so forth as it was input. Once we got done with that phase and part of closing, we really wanted to start from A and go to Z. So we did, and we had actually 2 or 3 sessions. The first one was an all-day final pressure test. Well, we started at the very first credit, and we went through every single credit, every line of every credit, every piece of data before we closed it out. A number of things came to light in that. It was a very, very valuable process. What we found was that a lot of the data that had been reported was in fact correct, but the assumptions had not been interpreted correctly, or the credit had not been interpreted correctly, and so it was basically, we need to go back to the responsible party and say, well, what did you mean about this and that? And here's our thinking on it. We reached out to STARS staff, asked a bunch of questions during these, and I'll say this about my colleague, Mr. Tabrizi. He has this uncanny ability to call people up. They answer the phone. You don't get phone mail. He asks them a question, and they answer the question, and we don't have to play phone tag. I don't know, he has this talent. So every campus needs somebody who can actually reach out and touch people and get answers in real time, because without that, the pressure tests would have drug on for weeks. But we were, I'm making a joke, but basically it was really helpful that we could get everybody sort of in the same place, more or less in the same time, and we teased out a lot of credits that way. So pressure tests, I think, are a mandatory part of the submission process, no question about it. So in summary, we learned a few lessons, and we're going to take these sort of sequentially here. So Linda is going to talk about the first couple.
Okay, so obviously, as we talked about in our planning phases, we obviously need to set some very clear objectives and project plans from the beginning, but we also understood that it was a dynamic process and we were learning as we were going, so it was, it needed to be an adaptive approach. So something Dave mentioned earlier is we started with thinking that we would collect certain types of data centrally, but then we realized that a decentralized process was actually more effective and would be a smoother process. Further, we also talked about how important it was to have leadership support from the outset. We needed that in a number of areas across campus, but certainly from the senior leadership in order to engage people into the process. Obviously, Natasha will take on a few of the next points.
Oh, I'm going to take these. Okay, so we're just passing the hat here. Establish a dedicated team with results orientation. Well, So this is where I got to say that without Linda and Natasha, none of this would have been possible. So as you heard in the outset, Natasha's an undergrad, Linda's a grad student. The breadth of experience and knowledge base between the two is incredible. The work ethic was incredible. And they showed up once or twice a week for 6 months, and we had meetings and in between lots of emails, and really put this thing in the final phase on their back and got it over the finish line. The closing phase couldn't have happened without that kind of horsepower. Mo and Kristen also really, really helpful, again, closing it out with the pressure test, with the follow-ups, with the interpretations. And while you need a strong team, you need them most in that last month. Engagement, collaboration, and communication, sound like nice words, and Linda touched on this earlier on. I think one of the genius of STARS, and it sounds modest to say that, but one of the smart things about STARS, one of the things that is a real benefit to the campus, is the breadth of its credits, and hence the breadth of your ability to bring new players into the conversation. Can't stress that enough. We're talking to the co-curricular people, we're talking to the diversity people, we're talking to people who normally don't show up for sustainability meetings, not because they're not doing a great job, they're not moving forward, but they're just not part of the traditional choir. We expanded our choir because of STARS. That's simple.
Finally, as we were conducting the process and immediately after completion of the survey process, we discussed the whole STARS system with various responsible parties for credits. As mentioned before, we delegated to quite a number of people, about 40, and we collected their fresh overall impressions as to what could have been done better about the credits, or what could have been improved at the CU level. Then we used that information to set policy at CU, and we used the stakeholder impressions to streamline the processes that were conducted at CU. One example here is, even though we aren't receiving credit for it because it didn't come in quite before we submitted, we applied for the Tree Campus USA program, and we'll be receiving that in the immediate upcoming period, whereas we may not have until much later had we not participated in STARS. And now I'm going to turn it over to Dave to conclude.
So, trying to get there we go. All right, so conclusions. Yeah, it's not easy, but with a good team, it can be done. No question about it. It's not easy, and it shouldn't be, is what I really wanted to say here. I mean, anything worth doing is worth putting some effort into. But frankly, it's not as hard as we thought it was going to be going in. It was tough in the places we thought it was going to be tough. The education and research credit's probably the most difficult. But we dealt with it, and we got through it, and it's fun. The lesson of a gap analysis is, again, something that came from Mo Tabrizi. Let's not just walk away from it. Let's use this moment to leverage to further success, because over time we know STARS is going to raise the bar, just as LEAD did, and we need to be getting better and use this opportunity to promote continuous improvement. Anyway, the good news also, we learned a lot about ourselves, and now we have benchmarks that program managers and directors and so forth are using to advocate for more appropriate and judicious allocation of resources into areas that need them. And going forward, we'll see, I think, improvement in areas, non-traditional improvements. And again, that goes back to the engagement. I think we'll see some more strategic allocation of resources into non-traditional sort of sustainability areas. So a great growth opportunity for us, and I think the gap analysis is going to help us going forward. And I'm being repetitive, so I'm going to move on to thanking our AASHE staff, who I thought we would pester to death, but they were always happy, or at least they faked it if they weren't. When we called them up or emailed them with questions, comments, and the occasional complaint about something. They dealt with it really, really well. Our campus community came together behind STARS, and that's really, really important. Obviously, every campus, especially a large research campus, is a bunch of silos, and people in different organizations, divisions, units, and so forth. Bringing them together is something we all seek continuously anyway. STARS was able to do that, and we look forward to your questions. And so with that, I think I'm supposed to turn this back over to Jillian.
Yep, I've got it from here, Dave. Thanks. And thanks for that presentation. Really appreciate it. It's great to hear what you guys did to achieve STARS Gold. And we have several questions that have come in that I'll be facilitating. And just a reminder to folks, if you do have questions, you can type those into the questions pane at any time. The first question is about gender-neutral housing. How did you define housing options and report on this credit?
Okay, well, that question came out of nowhere. Let's see. The housing, I'm trying to remember who the team leader was on that one. I'm not sure I can answer that one right off the top of my head, Jillian.
Okay, we can come back to it. That's no problem. We'll come back to that one. Sorry to get you out of left field on that. The second question is, how did you get approval from senior management to use STARS as a reporting tool?
Okay, so how do we get approval from senior management? I think leadership was very interested in STARS for a number of reasons. I think one clear reason is that having all of our sustainability data all in one place is an attractive option going forward as it relates to the myriad of survey requests and data requests we get ongoing from an array of organizations, ranging from Sierra to Princeton Review and so forth. And so, again, having a central reporting tool and a centralized data collection methodology. So it wasn't just the reporting tool that was attractive. I think it was the notion that we're sort of defining the scope of sustainability activities and getting responsible parties sort of identified, and then using that moment to hopefully streamline and reduce the workload of people going forward, getting sustainability data that we'll have ready to go in real time for all of these other requests. So that was a biggie. And likewise, and this again goes back to Boulder's culture. I mean, the culture of sustainability here is pretty strong, and we wanted to participate and show our support of STARS because it's clearly the coming thing. Our experience with LEAD has been very positive, and that STARS emulated LEAD, I think, was something that gave leadership a lot of comfort because they understood it intuitively the moment it was described to them. And it wasn't some alien type of weird scoring system or any of that. It was very transparent, open, and familiar. And I think those were the biggies that, I think we saw an opportunity to hedge against repetitive data requests. We saw an opportunity to show our support for a worthy initiative. And it was an idea whose time had clearly come.
Great, thanks. The next question is, how much staff time did this take, either by month or year, if you have an idea?
Well, I'll let the student staff talk first about how much time they put into it.
So I would say that we were dedicated to weekly meetings that ran at least perhaps 3 hours per week. That was sort of an absolute commitment. When we had the process would require more of our time at different stages. So I would say we could work up to, myself personally, I don't know if Natasha will feel the same, but it could be up to 15 hours a week, 10 to 15 hours a week. Certainly over the summertime, we were more dedicated to trying to get as much work done as we possibly could, knowing that we were out of session. So I would say perhaps even in the summertime we dedicated even more time. But we did have some opportunities for breaks and obviously for our own personal coursework and travel. But we did make a fairly sort of dedicated commitment of at least, I would say, 5 hours a week on average on a not very busy week, and probably up to between 10 and 15 hours a week into each of us. I'm talking about Natasha and I, when we had busier times of reporting or things that we needed to work on. Natasha may have something else.
Yeah, I would say that would be about accurate at the higher end with about the 15 hours a week, and at the lower end 4 or 5 hours. I might also want to add that we did this as a very decentralized process, and if it is far more centralized as in a smaller university, there may be fewer people who are inputting data, and that would lead to fewer people working on the project, but putting in more hours.
So that's the central core team. I probably matched the amount of hours that Linda and Natasha put into it, and I know that my colleague Mo Tabrizi and Kristen Epley also engaged probably in similar workloads coordinating. And of course then there's the 40 or so responsible parties, some of which had more or less credits under their auspices, and they put in whatever they put in order to get those data and those credits completed. I'd say nominally probably 3 to 5 hours, probably upwards of 5 or 10 hours maybe per credit per responsible party, which probably sounds like a likely estimate. Some less, some more. Some people we met with several times. Some people just phoned it in, they nailed it the first time. Depends on the nature of the credit and so forth, how knowledgeable people are. But yeah. And one thing that I'm reminded of is the strength of a generic login. One of our mistakes, or at least one thing we didn't realize early on when we had a workshop and brought all responsible parties together, is we tried to get them all their AASHE passwords and so forth, and individually logged into the reporting tool. That worked for about half. The other half had a lot of difficulty. We ended up creating a generic login and using that from then on. It was much easier, so I definitely highly recommend that. But yeah, it was not without a lot of time. Again, we're a big place, and we were going for a lot of credits. I suspect a smaller campus that maybe can opt out of a number of credits. We were only able to opt out of, I think, 2 tier 2 credits. Obviously, it'd be less time.
Great, thanks. You know, as an AASHE staff person, we get that question a lot, and I've really found that it varies greatly among campuses. Like you mentioned, Dave, the size of campus has a lot to do with it. Whether or not the institution participated in the STARS pilot program might have something to do with how much time is spent on it, how many people are working on it at one time. So there are a lot of factors, but I do appreciate you taking the time to answer that. This next question is a 2-part question about your definition of sustainability. The first part is, were the definitions of sustainability in the curriculum and research reviewed by faculty, a broader group, before the interdepartmental committee approved them? And was there any pushback on the definitions, especially from those that were not involved in creating them?
So I'll take a first stab at answering that. We trusted that our faculty member that was responsible for E&R credits had a pretty good sense of representation, if you will. So we did not expose the definition to larger groups of faculty. It is possible that aspects of it were discussed within the three-person committee, whether they discussed it with others, but it was not extended to larger or broader groups across campus. Not to our knowledge, and Dave may know something, but not to our knowledge there hasn't been any particular pushback. I suppose that if we were to advertise that such a process had happened and faculty across campus, we're talking about 2,500 plus, were tuned into that, perhaps we would generate such a pushback, because inevitably as people engage, there may be in fact comments or different ways to approach something. So inevitably, we expect that that's possible over time as more faculty engage in the process, but to my knowledge, we haven't had any obvious pushback on the definition.
You know, the only thing I'd add to that is to give Linda a little bit of credit was really Linda's concept to essentially put together a straw man first using PhD candidates and so forth and work with some associate faculty to come up with a draft and then bounce that off of the responsible party. So the second thing I would throw in is that Dr. White, who is the director of one of our most prestigious research institutes, has such standing on his campus that I doubt he was going to get a lot of, you know, in a way it is, people respect him, and so that helped. And as we reported, the other members of the committee are also highly respected department chairs or research institute directors. So it's not like it came out of, it had a lot of standing, I guess. And then when the faculty, the broader faculty saw it, is when the survey came out, and the survey that you saw briefly, which, again, didn't get us enough responses to be sufficient, but the survey came under the auspices of the provost. And so the memo came from the provost, and the survey came from the provost. And so by reference, the definition came with the provost's blessing and the blessing of, you know, these highly respected faculty members. So I think having faculty of a sufficient standing must have worked, because I have not heard much blowback. In fact, what I have heard from faculty is, good job. We appreciate you taking that one on and sort of operationalizing the definition. That was the biggest concern that I heard, was that it would be a definition so broad as to not be applicable. But again, as Linda pointed out, we made sure that the definition was something you could take, look at a course and say, okay, yeah, it's got this, it doesn't have that, whatever, and it was sort of operationalized. So on the contrary, we've heard pretty much positive reviews from it. I'm sure there's some faculty that, you know, have tweaks, but I think the process was deliberative enough and legitimate enough where most of the faculty were happy just to have something to work with.
Great, thanks for that feedback. The next question is, what STARS criteria should be revised and why?
Well, this is a conversation that's longer than we have. I'm sure Megan is giggling back there. There's inevitably, with the first iteration of anything, room for opportunities to emerge to get better. And certainly there are many STARS credits that have opportunities to get better. I really don't want to single out any of them at this point and say this or that, because as I know as a member of the steering committee of STARS, there's more to it than meets the eye. Inevitably, when you find a area where you think there could be an opportunity to get better, and you think about how to make it better, all sorts of aspects come into consideration that you hadn't thought of. So the only thing I can say here is, you know, back in the day when LEAD 1.1 came out, I think in year 2000 or 2001, so the very first edition of LEAD for new construction, I was part of the team that built a gold LEED building in Florida, and boy did we find some room for improvement in LEED. And as we've seen over the succeeding 10 years, LEED has gotten a lot better. So I think there'll be much better iterations of STARS going forward, and look forward to being part of that conversation, and urge everybody on this webinar to be part of that conversation.
Thanks, Dave. And also let the audience know if they have suggestions for ways that we can improve STARS. We would love to hear feedback from our community. So you can send an email to stars@aashe.org, and we'll gladly take your feedback. The next question is, what data collection strategies worked best for CU Boulder?
Yeah, I think we learned greatly, and let Linda talk about that.
So I would just say, again, as I mentioned earlier, it was a learning process for us as well. And we started out with some spreadsheets, and we started collecting data, and we thought, well, in large organizations, normally that's not effective. And so I would say that decentralizing our process, delegating responsibility to others, engaging them in the process, giving them access to the reporting tool, they are the people that have the most specific knowledge of the information relative to those credits. So I would say that was the best decision and best practice that CU could have employed or deployed, given its size and given the diversity of what is happening on this campus.
And at the level of the core team, it's also important to understand what data elements are required for each credit. And if we have to have a committee approve a definition, as in some education and research credits, or generate data ourselves that was not previously existing, we would engage in that process a bit earlier, or make sure that people had everything they needed to start a little bit earlier than otherwise.
The other thing I'll add to that very quickly is that we also sought to make the responsible parties' workload as little as possible, and so Linda and Natasha sourced out a lot of the data that appeared in many places, such as what was the enrollment in year 2009, what's the total number of faculty. So they got as many of the background data as we could get and installed them, literally put them into the reporting tool in the places where we needed to have them, so that then the responsible party only needed to come up with the data that was germane to their content area and not go figure out unilaterally, well, what was the enrollment, for instance, that year, or whatever other supporting data needed to be present in the reporting tool. So the STARS core team got a lot of those common data, and I forget how many there were, but it was a fairly good bit of work. And so the advantage of that is it reduced other people's workload, and likewise, we got the same data reported in the same formatting, so we had consistent data like tuition and enrollment and things like that. And I can't even remember them all now. I just remember it was a bunch of it. So I think that strength helped, the strength of the core team helped the responsible parties not feel that the labor barrier was so high.
Okay, thanks. The next question is, now that you've completed STARS and received your rating, what are your next steps with the STARS program?
Right, so the gap analysis I think is important, and we're doing that currently. It's basically 2 steps. There's a tactical analysis, which looks at the individual credits and what do we need to do basically to perform better in areas where we didn't perform so well, and what changes need to happen there, obviously, so we can get higher scores next time. And likewise, we also have a column in our gap analysis for the question of a minute or two ago, what do we need to tweak in STARS credits themselves? So Jillian and Megan, you'll be receiving a missive from us at some point with here's what's wrong with this credit, here's what's wrong with that credit in the world according to CU, and be able to take that under advisement. So we're going to try and make STARS better. And then there's a strategic element to the tactical analysis as well, to the gap analysis, where we're going to look more broadly at how do we allocate resources towards sustainability based on what we've learned from STARS.
Great. I really look forward to that email. The next question is, it seems as though that the CU Environmental Center had a lot to do with implementing STARS on your campus and really taking on a leadership role there. If an institution doesn't have a sustainability infrastructure, what recommendations could you give for them while working on STARS?
Well, I don't think that you need an environmental center to get this thing done at all. I think you need some dedicated students, and all universities have dedicated students. Finding the right ones is definitely key to this, and we were very, very fortunate that we had Linda and Natasha dialed in on this, and again, without it, we wouldn't have been able to get this far. So, that's working with student affairs, that's working with your academic departments, identify some key student leaders early in the process. They're going to be there for a year or so, that are interested in this, give them an internship, a part-time job, volunteer work, whatever you need to do to engage the students. Definitely job one is to engage a strong base of student staff that does not require an environmental center. Likewise, at the staff level, every university has got leadership and facilities, and you obviously need your facilities folks on the team, and so identifying the right person there. And likewise, in the non-traditional areas of student affairs and diversity and so forth, reaching out and engaging and using STAR's strength for engagement. And I think maybe Linda wants to add something to this answer as well.
I just wanted to add that obviously what we've described so far in our process is very much a coordinating and networked process. So as Dave says, you don't necessarily need something like an environmental center. We just happen to have that here at CU. But any neutral group, working group, you can call it a task force or whatever you want to call it, but the group should be a networked, a group that can network and be neutral to your campus, sort of work cross silos. So I would just say that to look for those places on campus where you can establish a working group that has the ability to cross campus in many areas is really important as well, because I think you need to be viewed as a neutral coordinating type of operation.
Great, thanks for that feedback. Now that you've completed STARS, and I'm sure you anticipate participating again, what will you do differently the next time around?
Well, a lot of things. We'll have a much better. First of all, we'll not have to establish the pipelines and networks that we established into sort of these non-traditional areas. They're now part of the STARS team and part of sustainability, and so the workload obviously will be much less next time. We'll know right out of the box to decentralize and empower responsible parties and know how to do that, and so I think that'll shave some time and workload off of the next STARS version. We'll also know from our gap analysis areas where we left points on the table this time, and we won't be leaving so many points on the table next time, because we'll know from this experience where we need to tighten up a little bit, and I think that'll be helpful. I think we'll also have a better sense of the time and effort required to close it out. I would say that was the most intensive and work-intensive part of the process, and budget accordingly in terms of our time and personnel, staffing, and so forth. For that last month or two to close it out is important, and I think maybe the magnitude of that took us off guard this time, and again, without a capable core team who put this thing on their back and got it over the finish line, it wouldn't have happened. I don't want to ask my core team to put that kind of time in on their weekends, at nights. I get emails 24/7 from our folks who were busting it at the last minute. Can't ask people to bust it at the last minute like this. It's, heroic effort this time, not reproducible nor sustainable.
Yeah, that's a great point. Oh, go ahead.
Jillian, I just wanted to add that given our response rate on our survey to faculty, I think that would come up in our gap analysis, and I think in particular looking at our timelines, possibly making sure that they accommodate all these different stakeholders on campus. And also, I would say that looking for champions within our faculty population that may help further us engage more faculty in the process, which is always, I think, challenging given their other priorities. And I would say that there are ways that when you use surveys, sometimes you think you should send it individually to each participant, but possibly what might make more sense in terms of our education and research credits is that we would send it to department heads and allow those administrators to somewhat be champions within those departments, and we might get a greater response rate. What we're aiming at is a smoother, more effective process in terms of data collection, and so I think CU has a lot of opportunity to continually improve those types of processes.
Great, thanks.
Great, thanks.
So I think we have time for one more question. And just going back to the individual that asked the question about gender-neutral housing, they did send in a little bit more information, and they're looking for a definition from the STARS staff. So we'll follow up with that individual after the webinar. So don't worry about that question, you guys. But the last... Oh, go ahead, Dave.
I was just going to say, it's coming back to me now. We have a GBLT center here, and I believe that the center director, Stephanie, was the responsible party for that credit, and they have definitions worked by that affinity center. And so I believe it was delegated to her. I'm operating off of memory here. I was just looking at the reporting tool, but I remember talking to her about that. So we did have staff resources that were available to help with that credit.
Great. Thanks for the follow-up. So the last question I'm going to ask here is, how do you think that STARS helped enhance sustainability at CU Boulder?
Well, my answer would be that I think we're more clearly, we have a clearer vision of the integrative possibilities of research, education, operations, student leadership, and so forth. All of the issue areas represented in STARS. I think now campus leadership and certainly rank and file campus community now understand that that aggregate is what sustainability is all about. And our job is to find ways to integrate it. And we're looking at that. We're looking at how can we leverage our talents and skills in one area to assist another in non-traditional areas. So I think the next level of sustainability in general for all of us is to figure out how to integrate and not be silo-driven, which is, of course, the endemic culture of higher education. And STARS has given us a vision of that integration, or at least a vision of how to go about bringing the right players to the table to talk about it. Linda? No? Ladies? I guess that's our answer.
All right. Well, thanks again, Dave, Natasha, and Linda for joining us today on the webinar and sharing your experience with STARS at CU Boulder. I really appreciate it, and I know the audience appreciates it too. Just to let the audience know that all of our contact information is listed here, so if you want to reach out to the folks at CU Boulder, you can do that, or if you want to talk to the STARS staff, you can email stars@aashe.org, go to our website, stars.aashe.org, or give us a call on our new call-in number, 859-309-6755. If you have a general question about sustainability, including STARS, where you'd like feedback from the higher education community in general, you can post something to the AASHE Campus Sustainability Discussion Forums by going to www.aashe.org/forums. We encourage you to do that as well. So thanks everyone again for participating. We will have a video and the PowerPoint presentations from this webinar on our website soon. And we'll be doing another webinar in January on Tuesday, January 25th at 2 p.m. that will be talking about communications and marketing of the STARS program. And we'll have some information on our website about how you can RSVP for that webinar. So thanks again, and I'm sure we'll be talking to everyone soon. Take care.
Bye-bye.